Godsmack has a new album out. It's called When Legends Rise. And did they sell out? Everybody says they did. Well, find out next in this video. Boom! This record actually isn't that bad, but it's all wrong. This album gets 25 out of 100. Sadly, Godsmack continued their, series of characterless and fake albums. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some really cool parts in this album, but in general the songs are boring. As far as I can tell, they didn't sell out because they didn't make songs like, The Unforgiven 2, which is actually a good song, and if this album was, filled with hits that sound like Unforgiven 2, this would be a really good album. But they changed their sound in a different manner, and I think that it has to do with the producer that they hired to actually produce this album. The simple fact is that Godsmack need a really good producer in order for the band to really shine. I believe that a good producer could actually bring Godsmack to the right mind space to create like a hit album. The first two albums were co-produced by Mudrock, who is actually a really good producer. Later on, he produced some Avenged Sevenfold and Powerman 5000 and some other records. The band was in the right mind space back then, and they really sounded good, and they were like, adamant to make a really great album. And, a producer like Mudrock actually helped them make really good songs like the ones on Awake. After that, on Faceless, you got David Bottrill. David Bottrill is a really famous Canadian producer who worked with just about everyone. Stone Sour, Rush, Joni Mitchell, Peter Gabriel, Tool, King Crimson, Kid Rock, Muse, Silverchair, and Stained. The band was also encouraged back then to play because they had Shannon Larkin behind the drums, and that changed everything. And voila, I Stand Alone and a whole bunch of other good songs. You could really see the team effort, and it actually paid off. Then on Godsmack Foe, they hired the great Andy Johns to produce the album, and when you look at Andy Johns' career and his credits, with production and engineering, they're like a mile long, and it's all who's who of rock and roll royalty. And then on Oracle came Dave Fortin, and Dave Fortin has a really good relationship with the band. Shannon Larkin used to play in the band with them. The band was in the right mind space. They actually went away from home in order to make this album. Oracle was also a heavyweight album similar to Awake because, I really wanted to listen to the whole album, not just like, a couple of songs. And then as time progressed, they kind of slowly lost their focus, and they managed to put out an album which really sounds uninspiring, and that's 1000 Horsepower. This album, When Legends Rise, is just another sequel in a series of these wrong mindset albums. I don't want to say bad things about this producer because he might end up to be a really good producer, but so far his track records are all these cookie cutter bands that sound exactly the same, and they're all like metalcore with singers that kind of sound like pussies. Most of them sound like boy bands with growl vocals, except for Attila, they just sound like shit. The best song on the album is Every Part of Me, but it's still not a really good song. This one just sounds kind of more special than the others. The first part of the album actually sounds a little bit more modern, but that's not really good. And the later part of the album actually sounds more like conventional Godsmack, but recent Godsmack, not the good Godsmack. The way that I see it, the song Bulletproof actually presents everything which is wrong with commercial rock radio in America. Those rock stations in America actually became irrelevant because they didn't know what they were doing. iHeartRadio filed for bankruptcy. So the way that I see it, they shouldn't be trusted because they don't know what they're doing and they're irrelevant. They just had clueless management, and check out other companies that also had clueless management. Gibson filed for bankruptcy protection, and the way that I see it, Guitar Center is also going the way of the dodo. The song Bulletproof was kind of an attempt to pander mainstream rock radio, while in fact they are irrelevant. And that's why this album sounds really uninspired and therefore uninspiring. Another thing that I want to cover in this video has to do with Godsmack's business decisions. Check this out. When was the first time that you think that Godsmack played in Australia? What year was that? You're probably thinking like early 2000s, 2002 or something. Wrong. 2015. And that's also the last time they played in Australia. Okay, well, Australia is really far away and there are, shipping costs and all of that stuff, but let's go to Europe. In the last 20 years, it's been really easy to have an A and a B rig, and the A rig to stay in the States and the B rig to be somewhere in Europe, and you just use it when you tour Europe. But through the last, 20 years of the band, they only played Germany like 10 times or something. They only had 10 shows in the UK, but they had more than 700 shows in the US. In fact, in their whole career, they played the US and Canada about, 770 times or something. And outside of Canada and the US, they only had 50, 60 shows maybe. As far as I know, they have never played Spain nor Portugal. They never played Greece. They never played the Czech Republic nor Slovakia. They never played Croatia. They never played Slovenia. They never played Serbia. They never played Bosnia. I can't remember if they ever played Hungary. In their whole career, they only played 3 shows in Japan, which is really weird because I know that they have a lot of fans there. And as far as I know, they actually never played Central or South America. I think they only played in Mexico once because it was Sully's birthday back then, and that's it. But even that was somewhere in Cabo and not like Mexico City. So yeah, I mean, they obviously didn't have an A or a B rig. With amp simulators, now it's actually more easy to tour than it ever was. I mean, you have amp simulators, all you need to actually bring are drums, and the rest can actually fit in like one little rack unit, which is the size of a fridge. Anyway, if I was Godsmack, I would tour the world every couple of years. I would get rid of amps, get a couple of fractal units or Kempers, and I would just play all of these countries, get all the money in the world to hire a producer, rent a studio, make the greatest album in the world, and just do it all over again. I wouldn't try to reinvent myself. I would just try to, get a decent producer, an old one, like an old guy with gray hair and all of that stuff. Someone who is proven or who gets it. And not hire some producer that's there to make you sound younger than you really are. So for me, When Legends Rise actually isn't that legendary, and I don't see any legends rising. And in fact, I know that I could do a better producing job than the producer that they had on this album. I know for sure that I would at least put out one song that sounds really good and that, kids, when they hear it, they would want to pick up the guitar or, pick up a pair of drumsticks and start, wailing away. Basically a song that, makes you pump your fists if you're a decent metalhead. If you want to buy the album, the links are in the description below. Please subscribe to this channel because there's more content coming out soon. Check out my other videos, you might find something of interest there, and me and the resident German dude right here are out here. Adios, guys.